All right, there we go. It's 6 p.m. It's the PoP. It's time to start, everybody. It's 6 o'clock. It's Wednesday. We are the PoP Baking Club, and I am Kathleen. I am going to do a demo tonight on a Swiss roll, and I have a bunch of different variations of the Swiss roll already. But we gather here and I give a lecture demo just like I would in real life. And for those of you who don't know, if you're just joining, my name's Kathleen. I am a certified executive pastry chef. I also teach a Proctor ServSafe. I taught at the college level for over 10 years and I've been in the industry since I was 15. I'm obsessed with baking and pastry and putting all of the ingredient knowledge that I've learned together and sharing it with you. Because if you can understand the ingredients in your bowls, you will have the power to bake like never before. Because of all of you and because of baking trends and because of my inquisitive nature, I am finding the answer to some of these things that, they become viral. And then I wonder, where did this start? Because a lot of times they're wrong, but then when I investigate it, I find the right answer. And so that's kind of the path I'm on. I am trying to support people who want to do a better job in their kitchens, waste less, make fewer mistakes, have less frustration. And it all starts with learning about your ingredients and how to read a recipe. And that's where it all starts. I am a recipe reader. If I don't like the recipe, it has red flags, I move on. But when you guys recommend a recipe, I go look it up. So I've been studying and looking into all these recipes that I never normally would, and I've been having a blast. I'm gonna talk all about the Swiss roll as we go along, and we'll talk about each ingredient and the recipe and how the inclusions or the things that are left out make a big difference. The recipes that I post live on my Linktree, and tonight you will find what looks like the same recipe. It's a Swiss roll, which is what we're doing tonight, and a chocolate Swiss roll. And I will demonstrate and talk about this recipe right now in real time. I'm gonna mix up the cake, get it in the oven. I have a Swiss roll I've already rolled in the refrigerator. I'm gonna slice up and show you. And back here, I have a cake that's ready to be rolled, so I'm gonna show you how I roll a jelly roll. And we'll talk about everything that I know about the ingredient functions and how to make it work. The recipe for the Swiss roll lives on my Linktree, and it looks like this. I take a recipe, and this is from a textbook. I highly recommend Professional Baking by Wayne Gislin. It's a textbook. A lot of schools use it for their intro class. Some chefs think I'm a dork because I like textbooks, but this is what it looks like. And the reason I like it is down the middle, it gives you the grams. And then I use my pen just to make it look bigger, but they block the ingredients in the order that they're used and used together, because in this recipe you'll immediately notice that there are two sugars, because you do a ribbon egg with the egg yolk, which is egg yolk and sugar, and you do a meringue with the egg white and a second sugar. Now sometimes you'll read, and this is where my fascination with how recipes are written comes in. You will read a recipe where it'll give you the grams, 100 grams of sugar, and then you'll get all the way down into the method and it'll say divide up your sugar. I think that needs to be up here in the scalings. So this is from a textbook. And it's interesting because I just want you to see a window into, if you were to go to a college level professional baking class, which is what I taught at for years, you would be looking at using everything in grams, baker's percentage, and then your ingredients. And right here it says the method. The mixing method is separated egg sponge method. That's the method. It doesn't tell you how to do it really. It tells you the method. And so I'm going to be demonstrating the separated egg sponge method. And then it tells you the scaling, and that means how much is going to go into a sheet pan. I have a home oven. The largest pan that can go into my home oven is a half sheet pan. So that's as big as I can go. But if you were to do this whole recipe, it weighs 1,642 grams. And over here, it says 820 grams go in per sheet. And that means that full sheet pan. So that would mean 820 grams times 2 is 1642. So this recipe as written will make 2 gigantic full sheet trays. So what I did is I put it in the formulator and I put these in just the same way as the recipe, and I took the whole recipe. Well, for the chocolate, I took it down to 23%, and for the vanilla down to 25%. And that's gonna give you a thin jelly roll. If you want to redo this recipe and alter some of the numbers, all you have to do is with grams is play around with them. But the cool thing about my formula and the formulator is that I can go up and down and increase and decrease the batch size very easily, because obviously I'm not going to do a full sheet pan. But this recipe, and I've made it a lot, I've taught it. I've taught people how to make Bush to Noëls, like a whole classroom full of people. This recipe works. Could we use this sponge base if we wanted to make like mini rolls? Yes, like a Hostess Ho-Ho. Yes, I can recommend this recipe fully, okay? The vanilla is great. Weirdly, it has no vanilla in it. It's just a yellow cake, and then the chocolate doesn't have any flavoring in it other than the salt, which is for the meringue, and the cocoa powder. It's just a rich, neutral base. And the whole point of the jelly roll is that the inside's supposed to be the star of the show. So inside of these, you can put anything from buttercream, jelly or preserves. I did a chantilly cream, and the one that's in the fridge, ice cream, which is really fun. But what I also do is I take all of the ingredients that are in this specific recipe, and I make an ingredient function chart that I put on my Substack so you can print it out. It's not just the ingredient function for an ingredient. It's the synergistic ingredient function for this recipe. What does cake flour do in this particular recipe? That's what's interesting to me. And then I actually have the optional additions down here of the cocoa powder, the water, which is necessary because of the cocoa powder. So I'll be talking about this as I demo. We're not going to miss anything, but this is a neutral cake. It highlights the fillings. I like the color, but mostly, and we'll get to this when I roll the jelly roll, I do not pre-roll my cakes when they come out of the oven. I know a lot of people do. But it doesn't make sense to me why you would roll it warm and then let it cool, because you're gonna crack it when you unroll it and you're fiddling with it. And I think the less you touch food, the better. So this recipe, I can tell you, can sit, it's in a bag in the sheet pan on a parchment with the parchment on top, and then I bag it with a bun bag. I think I've pushed these cakes 5 days before I've rolled them. And they do, you know, get a little bit weird, but this is the kind of cake you can make today and then you can roll it in tomorrow or the next day. It's very forgiving, and you don't want to refrigerate it. We want it to stay pliable and room temperature, and we don't want to change the texture or the moisture. We want to just leave it on the countertop. You can freeze it. It freezes really well, and this recipe is good. So I can't vouch for a bunch of others. I've made other sponge jelly roll cakes, but this is my go-to. If I'm gonna make something for Christmas time, a Bush to Noël, if I'm going to make something fun in the summertime, it's going to be with this. I can vouch for it. In general, people want to add things to recipes. I am struggling with understanding this because I don't have that urge. I don't know what it is about me, but if a recipe says do this, I just do it. And then I think, how do I want to embellish it? How do I want to make my filling stand out? I can put fresh fruit in here with chantilly. I can frost it, ice it. I can put meringue on it and torch it. I can do whatever I want, but it never crosses my mind to alter the cake. So you can do whatever you want, but just know the moment you start to do that, and it's not unusual, everyone does it, but people will say, how can I incorporate strawberry? It's got so much moisture. You're correct. So it's going to change it. And at that point, you have now become a recipe developer. And I don't have an answer for you in terms of how it's going to perform. But the way I would do it is, let's say I'd fill my cake with chantilly and then a bunch of fresh strawberries, and I would roll it in. Like anything that you can make into a plated dessert, you can think same that you would if you were trying to change the flavor of just about any baked good. Color, texture, temperature, variety of flavor, tart with sweet, bitter with salty, things like that. You want contrast and complement. And that's how I would put together a plate. And when I slice up my Swiss roll, you'll be able to see, and I'll talk a little bit about when you plate something, you are becoming a plated desserter. You are actually plating a dessert just like they would in a restaurant. And they don't look at the Swiss roll and say, it's done, here's a Swiss roll slice. A really, a nice restaurant's going to put a little bit of ice cream, which is cold and creamy. Maybe they'll add a little nut crunch on the top, or a little bit of color, maybe some kind of crumble that's a bright color. And a jelly roll, or you can call it a Swiss roll or a sponge roll, is a sponge cake. And this is a separated egg method, which is where you separate your yolks from your whites. Each one gets its own sucrose, which is table sugar. And we're going to begin with the egg yolk. because you kind of can't overdo it and it deflates less. If you start with the meringue, you risk it separating. And once you get your egg foams, you fold them together so that you don't deflate them. You get them in the pan immediately and into a hot oven, and they bake very quickly. The interesting thing about this recipe is there's no leavener. The leavener is the egg, and in the egg white lives water. And when you add air to your meringues, this is the steam when it cooks, and the air that you've added during the meringue and the egg foam period is what gives you your lightness. The perfect balance of this recipe is going to give you a jelly roll that's very forgiving when you roll it. Because when we roll it, we want to take our time. We don't want to be freaking out and thinking it's going to crack. And we want to create a circle that's nice. But we don't want it flat like that. And we don't want it all tight here and then big here or opposite. We want it to look pretty when it's sliced. So there's like a lot of little details that are kind of fun. So if you want the ingredient function, go to my Substack. If you want the original recipe and my version in a smaller half sheet tray size, go to my Linktree. All right, so I start with a fit check. I'm very basic. So I have no nail polish, short nails, no jewelry. No jewelry, I have my hair back. But once I wash my hands, I try not to touch my face or my glasses. I wear clogs when I work. They're safe. I wear short sleeves, and this is a little wobbly, but it should be safe. I use inexpensive $5 aprons. I wear a fresh apron every day, and I use fresh towels every day. They just go in the wash, just like if I were in a professional kitchen. This way, I feel, this like feels like my armor and my uniform, and it feels safe and like I'm ready to work. Even though I don't sell my products to anybody, but if you are taking 1 penny for anything that you do, I think you need to dress and showcase yourself in a professional manner. And I want people to understand that everything you do and say, everything people see when they look at you is an outward-facing example of what you believe in. This is what I believe in. Is it exciting? Is it fashionable? No, but it's safe, it's clean, and it's sanitary. All right, so this is my kitchen. I'm gonna wash my hands. We've got a beautiful warm day here in Connecticut. The sun is starting to go down. So let me wash my hands. All right. And then, the counter's always clean, but I like to sanitize it with just a little Clorox wipe. It wasn't actually working until, well, no, I did work. What am I saying? I made like 3 recipes today. So it's called a whip attachment. I'm going to need 2 of them because I am making an egg foam out of the yolk and an egg foam out of the white. These are my ingredients that I scale in advance, and these are my tools. I always pull the tools that I need so that I can easily access them and I don't have to go running around, and I don't just do that for lives. That's how I work. The reason I print out my recipe is because I use it to double check my scalings. Now I use a scale and I do all of my ingredients in grams, but we have 3 groupings of ingredients. So I look at the recipe and then I go through my ingredients and I confirm that I have them all right. And then I don't even have to look at this ever again if I already know what the 2-stage egg foam method is. So it's a good system. For yolks, I have, it says 80.5, so I tend to round up, so it's 81 grams of yolk. There's water, which is 21 grams. Again, it's 20.70, so I go up to 21. And then in that grouping is 54 grams of sucrose. That's my grouping. See how this works? These are going in this bowl with this whip. Then I go to the next part, which is cake flour at 81 grams. It says 80.5, so I go up to 81, put it over here, and I'm going to sift in with it the cocoa powder, which is the Dutch processed cocoa powder. 13.8 goes up to 14 grams. And I use Cocoa Berry Calibo because I get it at Restaurant Depot, and it's a beautiful dark color and I like it. It's a decent price. Then we have for the meringue, which is the other egg foam, 120.75, which is 121 grams of egg white. If you are doing egg whites and you're not really great at cracking an egg white without getting the yolk in it, do 1 at a time and then add that to your amount. And an egg white is around 30 grams, so you can estimate how many eggs you're going to have to crack. I never scale directly onto the scale. I do an estimate, I kind of stir them up, and then I go to the scale. And for the yolk, It's 20 grams per yolk. So you can estimate how many eggs you're gonna have to pull from the refrigerator. All of these ingredients, especially the egg whites and yolk, have been on the counter for a couple of hours now. Less than 4, but warm. They're warm. We need them warm, room temperature warm. And then I'm using sea salt, not kosher salt, and I have 1.6 grams. And I do 1.6 grams because of my mini scale. For these larger numbers, you're not gonna get a half, but for your mini scale, you will. It's very accurate. That's why you can't do 2 grams on your larger scale. You have to have a mini scale. And then the sucrose is 40.25, so I go down to 40. This is the egg foam for the yolk, which is a ribbon egg, and this is the egg foam, which is a meringue for the white. See how these go together? Do you see how this is a physical representation of my recipe? Do you see how this can make it so there's less chaos and fewer mistakes? That's what I think. And then this tray that I set all of my ingredients on, I always line it with a parchment. This is going to be the same pan I use to put the batter into. So I'm always thinking about being efficient and clean. I'm just gonna put it over here. If you're taking notes right now, I was talking about diagramming out the method. I know this method, and right now it's physically diagrammed out because I know I have these 2, and then I have the dries. But if I wanted to write that on my notes, I would have that kind of information here. And really what this says is mixing is a separated egg sponge, sift cake flour and cocoa powder together, line pans with greased parchment, bake at 425, approximately 7 minutes. It just goes up there so I can look at it. Put it on the wall with paint tape. So I'm gonna get started on this, and then it's gonna get a little bit loud, and it's gonna take a while, believe it or not. I don't know how long it's going to take, and if the bowl was cold or the eggs were cold, it would take longer. When they're warm, just like when your muscles are warm and they stretch more, when the ingredients are warm, they incorporate more air a little more quickly. I don't know what number I'm gonna do it on. There's no number I do it on medium to medium high. I never whip anything pretty much on high. You want to build bubbles are all the same size, so you want to go slow and steady. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is time, temperature, and moisture. The moisture that lives in these ingredients, the temperature of the ingredients, and then how long I mix them. And if you've been playing along and you've been doing recipes with us, we've been doing a chocolate cake from Rose Levy that was a sponge. We did a yellow sponge cake. We did a Madeleine that had a sponge in it. These are leaveners that are driven by our eggs, not a chemical leavener like baking powder or baking soda. And the only water that comes into this recipe is from the egg whites. Egg whites have water. Now, because cocoa powder is drying, even though it's got fat in it, which is cocoa butter, it's a dryer. It absorbs moisture. That's why everything has an ingredient function, and you can't just swap this out for something else without understanding what you're doing. The cake flour is going to absorb a lot of moisture as well. And I've been seeing a lot of videos about making your own cake flour. And I'm not gonna go into detail right now. I'm just going to tell you, friend to friend, there is literally there's no foundational reason that you would use anything other than cake flour. If a recipe, like a sponge cake, like a jelly roll, calls for cake flour, this is not the time to use AP, and it is not the time to use all-purpose flour and add cornstarch to it. You are not changing the amount of gluten in this if you take AP and add cornstarch. It's so erroneous. Please don't do it. So people always ask, do I have to use the flour? There are times when you don't have to use cake flour. Sometimes. But in cakes like this, where we're gonna spend 15 minutes whipping these and 15 minutes whipping these, do you really want to then invent something that's not even real? And it's not science-backed, okay? So we're using cake flour. It's around 10%. I like King Arthur. It is unbleached. That's a whole nother topic. And if you want to go back and look at the Rose Levy Berenbaum cake, I talk a little bit about bleached flour versus this. We are using unbleached. All right, so I'm gonna get going here. We're gonna get the yolks in here, get it going, and then I can talk more. And the good thing about this recipe is it doesn't take long to bake. That's the only good thing. Sometimes if I get too slow into talking, what can happen is we're here really late because the baking time is going on. So this is good. We're going to get the yolks in here. I like to scrape. Eggs are a food safety hazard, so you want to make sure that you do not cross-contaminate. Salmonella is in every country and everywhere. It needs to be something you handle with care, especially if you have little children or people who are immunocompromised or elderly. I am going to take this and put it over here and not touch it. I'm also going to wash my hands very quickly. Salmonella can cause all kinds of problems, and there are a lot of outbreaks going on right now anyway. So for my whip, I'm going to take the whip attachment and attach it. And in my egg yolk is fat and also naturally occurring lecithin. Lecithin is an emulsifier. Emulsifiers take two things that don't like each other, like oil and water, and they attract both of them. So the emulsifier is going to hold on to the fat and the water. It's going to make those things go together, and so we need those emulsification properties to make a nice, soft, lovely cake. What we're going to do is get it started. And I'm going to add the water right away. And it's pretty liquidy, and I'm just going to add half the sucrose. And because this is such a small recipe, which I think is great when you're practicing and learning new things, and this means that you don't make these giant mistakes. It can be inversely a problem is that it's so low down here that you're going to have to double check. So we want to make sure before we go too far, you can see sucrose particles and egg chunks, right? We do not want that. I'm going to go around and kind of pull these in, and I'm going to stop a couple times during the mixing to make sure that we don't have the dry bits there, because that will ruin my egg foam. I don't want to have horrible chunks and things that are bad. So I'm going to revisit this, and it's on medium. All right, so now that's going to go for a while, and we can talk, but here's something else I'm going to do. This is the next step. If I had two machines, I could have the meringue going in one and the egg yolk, ribbon egg going in the other, but I don't. I have one machine, two bowls. I want to clean this bowl with vinegar because I want to make sure there's no residual fat on the whip or the bowl. I need none. If you want to understand it better and ask, is it really important, or why isn't my meringue coming together, you have to be really honest and say, I don't care if I used Dawn on there and I got as much grease off as I could, you can't see it. So I'm going to go through and give this a really good cleaning. And the reason I do this is because if I'm going to spend 15 minutes doing this and 15 minutes doing this, am I going to skip this step? That's why baking isn't about like being perfect or doing everything right. It's about thinking like an ingredient. And I know an egg white can't even have the tiniest bit of fat in it. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Do you see how these are sticking to the side? I'm going to try to pull these pieces in, and you have to do it early. Because if you leave things too long or you add bad to good, you ruin good. Okay, so there, it's not that light, but it's coming up. So you are going along with me to see the process. If I'm going to take this long to do this, and all of these ingredients, which are not cheap, so this isn't the most expensive recipe in the world because we don't have chocolate, vanilla, or butter in it, but nonetheless, we want to be careful. I need to give the egg whites their best start, okay? And the reason we have salt in here is for a few reasons. You know, it's for flavor and whatnot in the end result, but it helps stabilize the meringue. Egg whites are protein and water. Protein is just like your muscles. They stretch just like our muscles do. And in egg proteins, when they grab together, they hold on to each other, and then the water that lives in here kind of gets sloshed around, and your sucrose dissolves in the water, and then the proteins are making these like connections, and in between is this viscous syrup made of the water and of the dissolved sugar. So you have these bubbles that are filled with air. That is what a meringue is. And if you whipped it on high, you'd have giant bubbles and little bubbles. They'd all be uneven. So if one big bubble broke, then your meringue's going to fall apart. It's going to deflate. But if you go low and slow, time, temperature, and moisture, you have these nice and warm so the proteins can stretch like your muscles stretch, and you use a little bit of salt to help get the proteins strengthen a little bit to kind of get them going in the beginning. You will hold a bunch of similarly sized air cells so that if one breaks, the whole thing doesn't deflate. This has to be strong, this has to be strong, and then when we fold our dries in, we're going to do that very carefully. And that is how you make a separated egg sponge. And it's fascinating that the simplicity and the complexity is what makes it so beautiful. Okay, so let me show you what's going on in here. All right, so whenever I shift gears, I'm asking for you to think what's going on in here and what does it look like to you, and make some guesses about what I might say. So I can see air bubbles. Can you see the air bubbles beginning? And when I drizzle this, it dissolves back into the batter, but not completely like in the beginning, but they don't stay. We're going to take this to ribbon stage, which is when I drizzle on there, those ribbons of batter take a few seconds to dissipate. So I'm going to put that back on medium. So this is going. Meanwhile, I'll pull my labels off of these guys and get them ready for the next stage. And I keep my stickers here to make sure I don't lose track of my labels. In case I make a mistake, I can retrace my steps. And I am never going to pre-add anything. You don't want to pre-add the salt to the eggs or anything. And I always add a little bit at a time. I add ingredients together slowly in halves or in thirds. Time, temperature, and moisture. These are warm. I slowly add the sugars, and then I go on medium, and I take longer to build a stable emulsion, which was the water and the fats in the eggs, okay? Those are coming together to create an egg foam. And that's the foundation of this cake. I'm just gonna check it, because if it's getting close, then I'll pull the camera over. Now, like I said, I'm gonna give it a little longer. You can't really overdo an egg foam. You can underdo it, and you wanna get it so that when you are using it later, it doesn't dissipate, doesn't fall apart. Pull you guys over here. All right, so it's looking good. I'm gonna show you. So if I hadn't checked the edge of the bowl and there were sucrose particles there, crystals of sugar, or chunks of egg yolk, that would remain when I fold in the dries and the meringue. Again, why would you do all this to then not have a good result? So if you're honest with yourself at every single stage, before you move on to the next, that this is the best rendition, and if there's some way to fix it or remedy it if you've made a mistake, you want to do it now, because quite frankly, if it's so bad it's not working, you are going to have to either start over or admit it's not working, because you don't want to keep moving forward and wasting ingredients. So you're always sort of thinking, problem solving. All right, so you're starting to see streaks that are left behind on the whip. That, which is okay, we want to look at how is it staying. All right, so what do you think I'm going to say? Do you think I'm going to say it needs longer? I think it needs a little longer, just a little bit. I want to make sure, because this is going to have to sit on the counter while I do my meringue, and that's going to be a minute. Yes, everything in this recipe should be room temp, and it is warm here, so that's good. Kind of can't be too warm. It can be too cold, and then I might torch the bowl, but I don't need to today. Woo! So I cleaned my next tools, the whip and the bowl, with white vinegar, because I'm going to be making meringue. Sea salt, egg white, and more sucrose. I'm using sea salt that's fine. You can use kosher, it will dissolve, it's absolutely fine. There's enough water in these egg whites that if you add the salt in the beginning, it will definitely dissolve. It's not impossible to overbeat the eggs, but kinda. I mean, there's so much fat in there, you kind of can't, but what you could do is dry them out. So you would have to forget about it and leave the room for 10 minutes. You don't want to dry it out. So no, you can't over mix them like you can a meringue, where you break the gluten strands. Eventually all break, because you'll rip them like you rip a tendon, but not with the fat in there. But you can dry it out. You don't want to dry it out, because you need whatever you have to have as much oomph in the oven as you possibly can. All right, so let's see. Make sure that the edges don't have anything I don't want on there. I'm noticing it's a very light lemony color, and this is what I want to have happen. When you do that, they stay. And these are my ingredients, and then this is where I put my dishes in my dish bin. So I'm going to take my spatula and I'm going to clean this up. I don't want to leave that up there because it will dry. And just because I want to just go around and make sure that there's nothing going on I'm unaware of. And I am going to leave my spatula in there. I'm going to move this over here. And we're going to immediately move on. If you start a meringue and it does not start to come together, it means you got a little fat in there, or there's fat on your tools, and you pretty much, after a couple minutes, you need to stop. Nothing's going to happen after 2 minutes. No, you do not wash after you use the vinegar. You just do a little bit, it's not a lot, and it evaporates. It's edible, it's not going to interfere with flavor, and if anything, that tiny bit of acid is going to irritate and strengthen your egg whites. So these are gonna go in. They are really, really room temperature, which is great. And then what I do is kind of on low, start to denature them, meaning right now they're all like kind of crumpled up and everything. You know, I call it glooping. It's when you pour them out and they all gloop together. They're all hanging on to each other. So before you put anything in here, and on very, very low, just start to loosen them up, denature them, just like a little bit of foaming. And I will show you when I add the salt. This is the sifter I'm going to use. So I'm going to add the salt. I'm going to do it in front of you. So as soon as it starts to get foamy, you're going to add the salt. And I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Now I told you that what's great about this is that it's a small recipe. But what's not great about that is then you have less pickup. So I just want to make sure there's no salt stuck to the edges. And remember, there's a lot of water in the egg whites, which is a good thing. But you can see they're a little bit foamy. So then I'm going to go like this. And then I'm going to add half of the sucrose. This is the sugar, just half. I'm going to give it a sec. And then I'm going to add the other half. Then I'm just going to stop it to show it to you, and then we'll go back to the other camera position. It's just starting to get foamy. And there's really not a lot going on, but it's still sticking together. There's still proteins that are glooping together. Okay, so now we're just gonna put it on a medium and let it go. And the whole thing about a stable meringue is that you go slow enough to develop stable air cells, which is a stable meringue, stable foam. You add the sugar slowly so that it doesn't weigh it down, so that every step of the way I'm taking care, and then at the end, as it gets to medium firm heat, I'm going to show you how to test it. A lot of people just lift it up like this and hang it. You really need to turn it, and it's not as stiff as you would think. And if you go too far and evaporate out a lot of that moisture, and you have strengthened those protein strands, they're going to be like this. And so when you put them in the oven, they're already like this. How are you going to get the cake to go from batter to rising? You're not. So you want this to be like, it starts out like this. It's just egg whites, and then as you start to they do this, and they start to grab on, they start to make the bubbles with the syrup of the sucrose and the water in there, and then eventually they get stronger and stronger, but you want them to get to about here. So when you put them in the oven and that heat gets to the water in the whites, it pushes up. Now you've created some cell walls with your flour, some strength also with the protein in there, and the water, because right now this has a possibility of protein, and until that water is added, it's just inert. Once you add the water, the protein in here is going to start to do the same thing. So then you have a cell wall structure, and this egg foam is going to explode. It's going to open up and create starch cell walls that are tender because we're using cake flour, and it's going to set the structure, and it's a miracle. And then that water is going to eventually dissipate to some degree before you decide to take it out of the oven, and then you're going to let it cool, and it's all set to go. These eggs, it's interesting because they are from the farmer, so they're fresh, very fresh, which means they have more water. So you can see they come together really quickly, very foamy. Okay, so if you do this and you're like, oh, that's, you can't tell by doing this. It doesn't tell you anything. What you need to do is lift it and flip it over. Let me do it again so you can see. Actually, I'm going to do it from over here and show you. So when you do this, I'll see a lot of people will do this, and they'll kind of shake it over and say, is it stiff enough? That's not how you do it. You lift it up and you do this. Okay, so this is a soft peak. I want just a little bit more. And then the fun starts, because all we need to do is fold these things together. I am going to spray the edges of my pan, and that's it. This point in the game, sometimes I turn this down, but I'm going to do just the edges because I want to be able to get this out of here, but it's a sponge, so we need it to stick. Then my parchment is going to go in here, and my pan is ready to go. So this is what I call go time. I have cake flour and cocoa powder. I'm watching my meringue. I'm going to show you how I test it. So I'm going to lift it up and then do this. For me, that's good. I could keep going, and what you're going to notice, and what I want you to start noticing when you watch videos, is when people do the meringues of any kind and they do a close-up, if it's broken, they did it on high, they weren't paying attention, and it's completely overdone. So that's what you're looking for. You do not want it to be broken. You want it to be glossy and shiny. If it appears shiny, there's still water in there. If you've dried it out, it's going to look grainy and dull. And you're going to have grainy, dull meringue in your cake. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to fold everything into the egg yolk, ribbon egg foam, okay? We're going to fold it into this one, not into the meringue. So there's my egg foam. It's runny, but you can see the bubbles, and it's foamy. So I'm going to get everything out of here into my shallow bowl that's wide. Because when you fold, if you do it in a narrow, tall bowl, you will end up deflating your egg foam. You'll end up stirring it. You don't want to stir it. We want to preserve all the work we've done. Because we've done a bunch of work. We got all this air in here because we don't have baking soda or baking powder or anything. We have air. So now I'm going to take about 1/3 of the meringue and put it in here, and I'm using a spatula. And I'm going to use my proper folding technique to just lift and turn the bowl. And there are going to be streaks. I am not going to incorporate this all the way. That's it, I'm done. And I'm going to take half of the flour and half of the cocoa powder. And you could sift this ahead or whatever, but I'm just doing it like this. It's actually quite a bit, so I'm going to put that there. I'm going to fold this in. I'm going slicing down the center and then lifting and turning. That's how you fold. If you are going over and turning your spatula, you're deflating it. You just want to be as gentle as possible, work quickly, and don't overthink it. At this stage, there are going to be streaks. There are going to be lumps and streaks, just like this. That's okay. And we're going to take more of the meringue, almost all of it. I'm going to leave a little bit in. I'm going to fold this in. It's getting bigger. And if you make this and you think that your cake in a half-sheet pan is too thin and you're looking for it to be thicker, just adjust it. All right, so this is going in here, and then I'm going to do the rest of the cocoa powder, the rest of the cake flour. And we are doing cake flour because we want low protein. We want this to stay really tender and flexible when we roll it. If you use something really strong, or if you dry out your batter, when you go to roll the jelly roll, it's just going to crack, which is, we don't want it to do that. And this is a really well-balanced formula. So I'm still not going to get all of the streaks in here. Not going to worry about that yet. That is on your very last inclusion. You're going to make sure there are no streaks. All right, so I'm going to take what's left of the meringue. This is going in. And then it's very important that you get this straight into the oven. We're doing a jelly roll sponge cake, chocolate flavor. Cocoa powder is a dryer. And so when you change a recipe, you have to account for the ingredient function. And I added, and the recipe has you add water to the ribbon egg. So that offsets how much water the cocoa powder is going to steal from the other ingredients. Because the sugar is always going to get what it needs. The flour needs water. So you don't want the cocoa powder stealing it all. You need to make sure everybody gets an appropriate amount. All right, so now I'm looking, making sure there aren't any streaks. If you have streaks of meringue or streaks of the egg foam, the ribbon egg, when you bake it, those are going to be weak spots in your bake, okay? So I'm just going to look, make sure I don't see any weird streaks. If there are, it's not the end of the world, but I am looking. And then I'm going to get this straight into the pan. It's going straight into here because if I just let this sit, all these air bubbles are going to dissipate, and I need to get these lovely air bubbles into the oven as quickly as possible so the heat can do their job, steaming the water and pushing everything upward and forming the cake. Okay. I'm going to just take this, and you want to be very careful not to open this. I see people go back and forth a lot, and that is going to overwork your cake. And you don't want to push it up the sides of the pan. You want to push it to the corners and then stop. It will run into the sides, but if you push it all the way to the edge, it's going to get hot here and stick to the edges and get overcooked on the edges. So you want to just push it up to the edge. It will fall in place. And then finally, I want to make sure that it's not too uneven. And like I said, this might be thinner than you want it, but it is how I like it. All right, and if you go back and forth and lift, the parchment is gonna connect and pull. So you wanna really practice just going in one direction and keep the spatula moving and get done as quickly as you can. All right, so there we go. And then I'm going to put this into a hot oven right away. It's shiny. Okay. Hot oven, I think it's gonna take 9 to 10 minutes. And we will check it. We'll check it in 7 minutes. And I'm going to take these guys off the counter now because I'm done. But you don't necessarily have to throw them away. You can keep them because if you made a mistake, you might not even notice the mistake until that comes out of the oven. This is a yellow sponge that I made today. It's the same one we just did, except it's the yellow. And you have both recipes. It looks like this. Okay, it smells good. This is the bun bag that I wrap all my half sheet pans. It's a half sheet bun bag, and that's how I store everything. But let me see what your questions are, and then we'll check the cake, and then I'm gonna fill this guy. That's the fun part. This is not a genoise or a chiffon because it's a separated egg sponge, so that's kind of what it is. How is the sponge cake different from other cakes? Well, all cakes are different, and that's the great thing. You have some that only use egg white foam, some that only use the creaming method or the reverse creaming method, and some use chemical leaveners like baking powder and things like that, and baking soda. It depends. It's all about your desired outcome and what you're looking for in the end. And with a sponge cake, you're looking for a neutral flavor, delicate cake that showcases the filling and isn't too sweet or rich. If you try to do a Swiss roll with an American butter cake, it's going to crack. There's too much fat, which if you think about it, this is light and flexible, but if it had a lot of fat, it would be firmer if you had a lot of butter. That's how thin this is going to be. And you can kind of see that it's spongy. Sponge cakes are not as popular in the United States because they are not as sweet. I mean, there's no butter in here. There's no, the sugar goes into the meringues. It's not a lot. It's not like our American cakes. It's very lightweight. So there are lots of kinds of cakes, and they are all described by the method in which they're mixed and their ingredients. Can I use powdered sugar instead of regular? No, you don't want to use powdered sugar. You can use powdered sugar if you're doing a chantilly, but powdered sugar has cornstarch in it, and it's been ground 10 times it's been milled. So you want the grain and you want the dissolvability of sucrose. And a super fine sugar would be okay, But in actuality, with a cake, it's not a confection. You do want those larger grains. So I think sucrose is the best thing. Why did you add water to the egg yolks? Well, I added it because I'm doing the chocolate version. And if you go look at the recipe, there are two versions. This vanilla version does not have water. But as soon as you add cocoa powder to the chocolate version, the cocoa powder wants to drink the water from everybody else. The flour needs water and the sucrose needs water. And the sucrose is always going to get its first. It's always going to be the bully in the bowl. So now sucrose took a bunch of water, flour took a bunch of water, and the cocoa powder is like, wait a second, I want the water. And it's very thirsty. So now you don't have enough water. You're not going to have the right kind of cake. So whenever you adjust an ingredient, if you adjust any ingredient, if you add non-fat milk solids, which is like milk powder, to a cookie dough, if you swap out brown butter for butter, if you even toast the milk powder, if you switch AP flour with cornstarch for cake flour, you are not just swapping chocolate chips for white chocolate chips. You are fundamentally altering the chemistry of your recipe, and it doesn't care that it's a trend or that you heard you should do that. The ingredients do what they want to do, and they have needs. They are thirsty. They are wet. They are strong. They are, they all have an ingredient function, and every recipe has a different amount of moisture and fat and sugars. So if you are going to change something, or if you're thinking about why would I use this, all you need to do, and you could get How Baking Works by Paula Fagoni. How is powdered sugar different than sucrose? And how is it different in a sponge cake? Because if you really want to learn like I'm learning and like the things I know, every time you have a question like that, if you just go satisfy your curiosity, layering in that learning over time will be like one epiphany after another. It's these connections that makes you a good baker. It is not having a trick or the fact that a recipe worked once, or it usually works for you. If you don't know why something went wrong, it comes down to the moisture, the interaction of the ingredients. It's like basic and insane at the same time, okay? I got into a discussion about the Maillard reaction, and I was like in over my head immediately. This person's a chemist, because I was like, I'm not a scientist, but I fundamentally know how these ingredients affect the baking, and so do you, because we all know, we have food intuition. So if something comes out too dry, you have a cookie, it didn't spread, it sat in the fridge for 2 days and then it didn't spread, and it was a brown butter, well, you don't have enough moisture. That's why. It's all dry. That moisture migration happened and it's all dry. So you can actually answer a lot of your own conundrums, I swear. Let's see what we have going on in here. Okay. So it's I about freaked. I thought it was burned. Let me tell you what's something interesting. When you are working with chocolate is another layer of challenging to determine when it's done. So what we're looking for in here is some rise. It's not going to get huge. It's, the leavener is not like baking soda. It's the water in the egg. It's the air in the egg foams. But it's going to be shiny until it begins to dry out properly. And when you properly bake something, you have baked it to its point where the size it's going to be, it's gotten to the size, it's gotten to the height, it's gotten where it needs to go. Now it needs to dry out a little bit, because if you pull it out of the oven, that moisture that you didn't dissipate is just gonna sink back in, and then it's gonna fall. So what I'm gonna do is look in and touch it. It looks shiny to me. I'm gonna give it I don't even know if it needs 2 minutes. I'll do 1 and then look. What I don't want is to dry it out. When you're doing a jelly roll, you need to leave enough moisture that you can roll it, but not so much that it's gonna be soggy. If you dry it out too much and you try to roll it and it cracks, you might have to do some syrup or do some other things. But this recipe is so moist you won't even need a syrup. It's not baked to the end of the caramelization process. It's actually baked until the starches that are in there that live in like the flour are gelatinized. And so the moisture has to be dissipated. So once it's dissipated properly and the wall structure is set, then you're good to go. Caramelization is when the sugars get to a certain temp, and we're not gonna go to that, we're not gonna go high enough to caramelize anything. All right, so let's see what we're doing here. I think I'm gonna touch it, and when I touch it, it kind of bounces back, so I think it's good. This is my cooling rack. I'm gonna put it on my roller rack and then I'll pull it and show it to you. And then we are gonna roll a cake. So I can turn this off, and I'm gonna show you my cake. We're gonna let this cool all the way. So there are air bubbles. There we go. So see how it pulled away from the sides? It's an easy cake. It's a wonderful cake. I love it. Woo! And I rarely make the chocolate. I usually just do the vanilla. Set that aside. I don't want to burn myself. She's a beaut. She is a beaut. It does smell good. It's not like the best smelling cake in the world. It's like a very mild, it's a very elegant cake. It's got, you know, good manners. Okay, so I am going to put my gloves on so that I can handle this. I'm gonna make a jelly roll. I will show you really quick what I have in the refrigerator so that you can see kind of where we're headed. This is a Swiss roll I made earlier, okay? I rolled it in a parchment and then I wrapped it in plastic. When you make this, you want it to be a certain shape, and this just has chantilly cream, which is made with whipped cream and vanilla bean sugar, but it's soft and it's not going to just stay hard, but the cold kind of helps it retain its shape. If you're doing a buttercream, you can. So what you can do is if you wrap it, you can actually reshape it the way you like it, and then you could even go in and turn it and help it to get to a nice roundness. And then you're going to bring it to room temp at some point to serve it. So this is gonna go back in the fridge while I fill this guy and show you how I did this, and then we'll slice this and take a look at what it looks like on the inside. I'm gonna use a serrated knife to do that. So I'm gonna put my gloves on. If you make the cake, this is the same thing I just made, it just doesn't have cocoa powder or the extra water in it. I didn't even take it out or loosen it or anything. I just put another parchment on top and I bagged it. Sometimes they say I don't put powdered sugar or sucrose. I don't want extra crunch or extra stuff. This is how much it sticks. So if you can handle that, and then I bag it, and you leave it at room temperature, and you can leave it at room temperature for a couple of days without incident. But what I'm going to, what I'm gonna do is pull this out of here, like this, and then I'm going to get a clean parchment. So I'm going to flip this out, okay. So I'm going to flip this over. You can do this just to make sure it doesn't come off. I'm grabbing onto the paper and I'm just gonna flip it. When you take parchment off, you do not lift it up. You peel it with the cake. You go very slowly, okay? I'm just gonna go like this, peeling it along with the cake. That way, I don't tear the cake or the parchment. You just go very slowly. It's a little sticky. It is humid here today. Oops. And I have a couple little holes because it's thin. So I would say this, it'd be good if this was a little thicker maybe. But this is going to be my top. I want the top that used to be here to be my bottom, okay? So I'm gonna leave that there. And then I'm going to get the jelly. I would love to use a really bright colored jelly. This is a really natural one that we got from the farmer, strawberry rhubarb. And I think if it's gonna be a jelly roll, it should be a nice bright color. We had a couple natural ones like that just look like nothing. They look brown. So you do want to get something with a little bit of color, blackberry or something like that would be really nice. Okay, so then I'm going to put it on here and then I'm going to show you how I roll it. And I'm going to go ahead and take the jam all the way to the edge. And it's on a parchment so I can move it around if I need to. But the one thing you want to know when you're using a little offset spatula is you don't want to go back and forth a lot. You want to kind of go in one direction all the time. And I know I'm going in different directions, but what I mean is not back and forth like this. You could end up getting crumbs and just causing problems. It could stick and you could tear, things like that. And the reason I like these little 4-inch spatulas is because this tip becomes like your finger. You can get it right into the corners. Now this is not thick enough. I'm going to add more, so I'm going to go ahead and add the whole jar. And you know, personally, that's why I'm excited about the chocolate one. I like the filling to be a little thicker because I think that looks pretty when it's rolled. And this is very natural, this jam. But we want it to sink into the cake, not ploop out, ploop, ploop. And when I roll it, I want it to stay even and clean. So I'm gonna go all the way to the edges. And we're gonna cut off the ends. So if it's a messy end, that's okay. So I don't think you need to use a syrup for this because the jam has a lot of moisture in it. And you can do either parchment or a flour sack towel to get this rounded. When I do a meringue, I use the towel because it's a lot more delicate than this and you have to move really fast. Okay, I think this is good. Well, let me get here to the edges just a little more. Yes, this is all room temp. If you refrigerate it, it's just gonna firm it up and make it a little drier and a little harder to deal with, and you don't need to. If you want to freeze this cake, I would roll it all up depending on the filling and then wrap it twice after it's frozen and leave it in the freezer done. You can do the sheets also frozen. You can layer them between parchment and have them all ready. I'm using the gloves because this is a ready-to-eat food, and if I want to send this to my husband's work tomorrow, I don't want them being worried. I'm going to tell you guys a secret. There are a lot of people out there that do videos where they say, it doesn't matter if my hair is down, it doesn't matter if I wear gloves because I don't sell this. But I know for a fact that when people bring baked goods to, let's say, some nursing stations, some schools, some places, they don't eat it all the time because they are concerned about food safety. I'm just sharing something I know. So what you want to do, this is the trick, is you want to pick up the parchment and use it, okay? So we're going to pull this in, but it is so key that this first turn, you actually like kind of force it to be round. Again, with all the pastry I talk about, if you start out well, this will be much better, okay? And we also want it even. But then you're going to lift this up and you're going to push, pull it off, size bigger, and then you're going to lift and use the parchment to get it tighter and just move slowly. So I'm going to lift it up, rolling it in, and then I'm going to pull the parchment off. Can you guys see what I'm doing? And then lift and use that parchment to get that nice and tight, and then pull the parchment off. Okay, so you could roll it and just push it like this. But the reason I like to pull this is because I can literally control how tight it gets. And control the thickness by using the parchment, because you don't want this to end up flat. You want it to be round. A Swiss roll is round. It's not flat. To recombobulate it, I'm going to get a fresh parchment, and we are going to get an approximation of what it's going to look like. Okay, the ends are going to be the worst, but you see how I sort of have a spiral in there? I'm pretty happy with that side. So we'll see what the interior looks like. So I'm going to go get a parchment. I'm going to take this. Okay, so I'm going to get this onto here. Here we go. So I'm going to swirl it like that, and then I'm going to pull the parchment tight. This is going to hold it together while it firms up in the cooler. And this is a narrow one, so you can do it in any direction you want. Okay, so I'm going to get my plastic. Up, but anything you do to this to smash it or put it in a certain shape is just going to solidify in the refrigerator, so you want to make sure that it's the shape that you want. So to get the ends, what I like to do, pull it in like that, straighten it out. And if I were going to leave this a while, I would do a label that has the date and the name of what it is, because you might forget. So there we go. So I'm going to grab the chocolate one out of the fridge. I'm going to slice it. I'm going to take this guy out and put this guy on my tray into the refrigerator. And we're going to make this one look pretty and have a little bit of fun. I like plastic wrap, and I try to be judicious with it, but it's important in food to keep things from drying out and whatnot. So I'm going to take this apart. Can't really see, but you will when I get the plastic off. Like a sausage. I could double wrap this and freeze it, label it one layer. And again, your whipped cream is not going to completely firm up. It's going to get firmer than warm whipped cream. Okay. And then here's the parchment. I might leave it on the parchment for cutting. Plate to plate, a deli cup for the scraps, my thermal Hauser serrated knife that I love. I am going to slice off the end while holding it. And if you want, you can freeze this sort of thing and it's easier to cut. But I made this at like 4 p.m. Get a clean towel from the knife. What this is looking like. See, it's too fat on the inside. Let me flip it around and see the other side. So do you see what I mean? It's too fat in the inside. I always say if I were grating this, it'd be too much in the middle. Okay, it's not round. Here's what I'm going to do. I have the cake stand. And I am going to take this and cut it like on the bias. I'm not even sure if I'm doing this right, but you can do whatever you want. I don't know why I'm fussing. Too much whipped cream. So it's going to go there. And then I can sprinkle that with 10X. I'll take off my gloves in 1 second. All right, so I'm going to taste this. First of all, really good chantilly with a lot of vanilla bean. There's so much in there. But let's taste the cake on its own. It's good, it's tender, it's a little plain, but that's why the filling is so important. All right, so I'm gonna do one more bite off camera. Okay. So what I don't like about this is it's not a swirl, okay? Looks okay, it's fine. If I were making a Bush de Noël, fine. Cover the whole thing up with chocolate icing or not, a little powdered sugar and some meringue mushrooms, you're good to go. And you could do this for the summertime. I mean, if you did all this ice cream and then a couple meringue mushrooms and, you know, for a summer barbecue type thing. But this cake, look at how flexible. The cake is so forgiving. Like, I can literally open it up. It's that forgiving. And I think that's really important. So you put this on here. We'll stand it on its end. I'm going to move this guy back. I'm going to cut the other one that I just did, and then we can talk. And I will put it on a plate. It really is about the flavor and the visual. I think they're equally important, but let's get something onto the plate. This is the jelly roll that I just did. I like desserts that are simple, technical, classic, but can be embellished. And I wish I had some fruit or something to add to this plate, because I don't. Okay, so I'm going to do this. These have had no time to sit, as you are well aware. Okay, so let me cut a little. And I think it's beautiful. Okay, so what I can do, let me do a little plate here. Could do this. Just like cutting a cinnamon roll. And I could layer these on the plate like this. That could be the beginning of a dessert. Or this is a strawberry rhubarb jam. So what would you put with it? It's a vanilla cake. Strawberry rhubarb jam is very sweet. The cake is mild. So then you could complement it with fresh strawberries or blackberries or whatever, and an ice cream that would go well with the berry. So I think also to make this look pretty, so instead of slices, they could be on the diagonal, and that is the beginning of a really nice plated dessert. So I'm going to sit down and show you some of this stuff so I can answer your questions. This is the cake we just made. The chocolate one that right here, it's the same cake. So it looks like this. At this point, I could wrap it. I could parchment and freeze it wrapped. I could do a lot of things. So there are a lot of stages you can use. So I am gonna taste my little Swiss rolls, and I'm going to show you. So this is a seam. You see the seam? You wouldn't want the seam up. You would want the seam down. You see what I'm talking about? So this could be as simple as adding powdered sugar. It could be ice cream on the top with berries around. It could be a lemon curd. You could have a crumble that's sprinkled around, which would be really nice. And then this I just laid flat. But I will tell you, I think you can absolutely see the difference between a good roll and a poor roll. I mean, it's night and day. But there's nothing wrong with this. I put a lot of whipped cream in there, and that's good. This would be great with a hot fudge sauce and some complimentary crumble. And then this, what a lovely little beginning to a dessert. All right, so I'm gonna eat. This is the end. This is what the end looks like a flower that you trim off so the inside looks like this. So quite frankly, if I were to be doing this for real, I would probably do a little bit of work trying to find out, you know, how I want it to plate it before I started cutting into it. Yeah. It's like a plainer, sophisticated kids jelly roll. Very moist, very soft, very beautiful. And I made it the skinny way. You could fold it the narrow way so that it's much bigger and get larger pieces, and that would look really beautiful. And then I always put the extra. I'm eating too fast. This is how I eat. That's how I ate a lot of carrot cake. And this can just go in the fridge and the cake won't dry out. I also think this cake is very flexible. You can see the lovely bubbles it developed. It has a rich chocolate flavor, but not that rich to compete. And I would argue that this is not going to get soggy. You could even do this and then add berries and other things to this to make it look really pretty, and then serve it. You know, put it on your table or your dessert table and then pull it to cut it up and serve it if you want to. How long does that chocolate Swiss roll keep? It will keep like this. Your weakest link is what you have to pay attention to. So if I had jelly, this thing can sit on the counter. I can just wrap it or put it in a plastic container for up to 7 days. This has whipped cream. So the whipped cream needs to go in the refrigerator. That's the weakest link. But you're going to want to bring it to room temperature to enjoy, because this is going to get firm in the cooler. But these should last up to this. If the whipped cream starts to weep, is going to be the determining factor. I think in the fridge, you can get 2 to 3 days out of this. By the 3rd day, it's not going to be perfect. But these guys, I think, will last days and days. And if you keep them wrapped, you can just keep them on the counter, actually. It won't hurt them to go in the refrigerator, but don't serve any of this stuff ice cold, although it's really nice and soft. If you want to freeze it, even with the whipped cream or the jelly, you want to wrap it like I did with parchment and then plastic twice, label it with the date and the name of what it is, and put it in the freezer. And I recommend the freezer for up to 3 months, not because it's bad to go longer for safety, but because quality. And my refrigerator right now is really struggling. It's really humid. I've got a lot of frost in there. It's just very hot. Does the chantilly cream have stabilizer in it? Mine does not, because I just made it. I just put it in a mixer on medium with some vanilla sugar, and I put it right into the cake. I did that earlier. But let's say instead of doing it just for this and it going right in my fridge, or maybe being walked across the street to a neighbor's house, if you are going to be using this and it needs to sit in the car for an hour, you might want to consider, gelatin or some other gentle, not too much, but just enough to get you where you need to go. What is the difference between a bûche de Noël and a Swiss roll? A bûche de Noël is a Christmas log, and it's just meant to look like a log you would put on the fire at Christmas time. But that's why I call it a jelly roll. I think this is a jelly roll, and you can call it a Swiss roll. Little Debbie has a Swiss roll. If you say Swiss roll or jelly roll, this is what people would picture. If you say bûche de Noël, and I did a ton of these last Christmas, like a lot. I had so much fun, because I make sugar poinsettias and stuff that I just like. I have to make something to put them on. This already looks like a log, so all you have to do is make a meringue mushroom. And if it's summertime, you want to do a woodland theme, you can do a little matcha green tea to look like the moss, and little things that look like rocks, like crumble, and a little meringue mushroom, or anything that you think looks like food. And if you want to do it for kids, you can do the gummy worms and dirt and things like that. So it's really just a log, but this is a Swiss roll, and it's meant to make you kind of know what it is. If someone says, you've made a sponge cake that you've then filled and rolled. How can I make the flavor more intense or richer? This recipe is well balanced. If you add more cocoa powder, you're not going to get more flavor, and you're just going to dry it out. This formula is good. I don't think you can do anything to it. In order to get more chocolate flavor, I would fill this with a ganache. A really nice weight ganache, not too thin. In here, you can do dark chocolate. You can do whatever you want to give it whatever flavor. So I guess what I'm always recommending is this recipe. I can recommend. It's perfect. It works, and it's been made by hundreds of people, and it works. Hundreds. It's been made by a lot. It's in a textbook, and it really does work. If you're talking flavor, which I love doing flavor pairings, you are talking about what do you add to the plated or the presentation to add the flavor. I mean, that's what I would say. If a student asks me, how can I add flavor? I'd say, well, fill it with something chocolate, or use a decor that's chocolate, or a crumble that's a cocoa powder, or something complementary. Okay, so this recipe to make the jelly roll is on my Linktree. All right, thanks everybody. It's a highlight of my week, I swear. Everything works toward this day. Woo, but we're done. All right, take care everybody. Good night. Happy baking. See you soon.